Yeah, it was easy to me because first and foremost, I'm coaching people, not players. So, I don't care where you come from, who you are, what you've done, who your father was, what part of the country you come from, green, pink, blue, black, white, I don't care. I just want you to give effort in my sessions, and I want you to get 1% better every day. Simple as that. And I've been like that all my life. You could take me to Toulon, you could take me to any of the French clubs, 3 New Zealanders, 2 Australians, 2 Samoans, 1 Fijian, 10, 15 French. Treat them all the same. We're all human beings, head, heart, 2 arms, 2 legs. Let's just get going and let's work together. I've never ever held any sort of not too sure about them, And it's funny, you've got to be really careful here because people will say, "Oh, you're going to South Africa. Oh, hey, the South Africans, they'll give you a comment of what they think South Africans are like. They'll give you a comment about what they think the Scots are like, what are Fijians like. Don't listen to it because usually it's been on the back of somebody drunk in a bar that, they've thought, I don't like that, Americans are loud, for example. They're actually not, right? They're phenomenal. There's a lot of loud people out there, So I've never ever been swayed by even the point. I remember the greatest story when Miami Dolphins, on the first day I went in, the whole defensive room, you've got players there worth $100 million. And I was honest and says, listen, guys, I don't know who one of you are. I've not looked at any Wikipedia. I've not looked at anything. We'll all just start on day 1, blank slate. And you could see some of them going like, bloody hell, this guy doesn't know who I am. Don't know who you are. Don't care. Let's see how you train this afternoon at 1 o'clock. Then we'll make a decision. So they're all going, bloody hell, we better get her, we better be on. Some guys went to the head coach to say, this guy you brought in doesn't know who I am, doesn't know who you are. What's going on? So, but even, you look at the Springbok team, I can still remember to this day, best line ever. On the centre spot at the 4 ways, Heineke Meyer said, Rich, come with me. So he walked me out to the middle of the field. All the players were getting changed along the side. He says, I brought you here because I believe you're the best in the world at what you do. He said, I'm going to give you 1 chance. Don't F it up, right? Because if you do, you'll never coach again. He blew the whistle and 40 Springboks come walking towards you. And I thought, right, let's go. Brilliant, brilliant.
But Richie, you just answered the question that I wanted to ask you. I think because that, you get a lot of coaches. Sometimes they might get intimidated by players, that are like high profile players. And I was wondering, like, how did you earn that trust of those NFL players? And you just answered it there, you made it clear from the start. He's like, I don't know you are. You need to earn your stripes. You need to earn your respect. Yeah. And it takes me back to Johan van Graan as well. Back in the day, he was a young coach. He earned our respect and he showed that he really cared about us. I think that's very important. And I think the common theme, which is coming through in a lot of your answers, we say, coach people, not players, is having that ability. We all have challenges that we are facing. We're all experiencing challenges. As all 3 of us sitting here today, chatting, we're having fun. It's great, getting good energy from this conversation, but we all have something going on where it's tough. And that also ties in to what you said earlier. You also sometimes just need to slow down. You've got to learn to have fun, which is very important. But Richie, I just want to change the dynamic of the conversation a little bit. You shared a lot of things. I think you shared also some of your challenges that you faced and your journey, and it's great. It's brilliant. And I'm super, super proud of you and what you've achieved. And it's massive. Just shows that anything is possible. But I would like to know if there's anything that you can share with our listeners or our viewers, and maybe diving in a bit deeper, a time in your life, any experience which was really tough. This is where resilience was built, where it was forged, where you had to really find solution. You spoke about being redundant, but like when you get to that dark place, what was the key driver or motivator that got you out of that hole?
Yeah, it's interesting, we're all of an age now where you possibly sadly lost people round about you as well. I lost my best mate and my business partner, a good friend of mine to cancer, sadly. Little things like that change your perception, I remember a South African journalist asking me at the World Cup, how do you cope with the pressure, right? And I said, to be honest with you, I had to chum my mate along because his mother was too old to go with him to a doctor's meeting to find out pretty much how long you've got to go or what's going to happen. That's pressure, We're dealing with 15 versus 15, chasing a blown up sheep's stomach around a bit of grass, Let's just put it all into perspective, And I've always been good at that. Don't get me wrong. I want to win, and I don't want my players standing behind the sticks. And I want my players to be, the most aggressive, accurate, technically proficient players in the league that they are in the game that they're in. That's what I want to happen. But you know what? I've just always been brought up as well. My father, as I said before, was a good coach. My father coached a high level. And he always used to say, and he was one of the most grounded people ever. He's still alive, 82 years old. He said, you know what? I'm only as good as my players. And I never, ever heard my father ever once say, yeah, you know what? It was my tactics that, that's why we beat Andrew Slack's Grand Slam Wallabies in the 80s. The South of Scotland were the only Saturday team to beat them on that tour. Ellas, Linus, Roger Gould at fullback, Poidevins, Lottens, all your legendary Australian players. I never heard them once ever say, yeah, I was the coach and, no chance. So you've been brought up in that. I'm the same in my town, the Gala Shields. I still live in my town. I walk through it. I meet my friends, people that I've known all my life, people that have known you, when you fell out a bar when you were 18 years old, when you got your backside kicked up the high street because, you made an idiot of yourself. So you can't get too carried away. You just got to stay grounded, And I think to come back to for me, I've been incredibly lucky with the head coaches that I have worked for. I've been incredibly lucky. And I go back right to my school days, right through. Tony Gilbert came and coached the Reavers. He was ex-Otago Highlanders, coached New Zealand with Wayne Smith. Genuinely outstanding human being, and still involved with Otago Highlanders now. Goes down and watches Jamie Joseph and the crew train. He's down there every day. And then you've got, Heineke was great. Vern Cotter was phenomenal for me because, I didn't really have a great sort of love for the Scottish Rugby Union once they got rid of you, and we all got made redundant. So I remember folk used to say to me, oh, you've been invited back to coach Scotland after South Africa. You must be really proud of that. I said, Vern Cotter asked me back. I said, it wasn't the Scottish Rugby Union. I said, Vern Cotter asked me back to coach Scotland. So, I thank Vern for a lot. And then Vern gave me the opportunity in France. And, we didn't know how it was going to work. A consultant, 10 days a month. And we thought, right, you know what, let's do this for a season and see how it goes. But in French top 14 rugby, it works brilliantly because it's such a long season. You want some guy that comes in with energy for 10 days. It just gives the other coaches a break. It's a different voice. It works brilliantly. So I think for me now, international rugby always worked well for me because it was a hothouse. It was 4, 6, 8 weeks intense and then gone. And this works well for me because it's 10 days, you're in, you're full on hairdryer, and then you're out. And just when they're beginning to forget things, you're back in again, So you've actually created a whole new way of working in our sport, And I think that you were the first really to do it. And I'm delighted, G, I've spoken to you, but I speak to a number of guys that are doing what I do across multiple leagues in the world. I've mentored a lot of them, and I just want them to have as good an experience as I'm having, And don't get me wrong, you have some bad days, defeats and you name it, but that's the sport, and the sport is getting up from that and fighting your way back out of it and finding a way,
But how did you fight out of that? That's the question. How did you fight that out?
You know what
How
you
did
do?
you get to stay in that fight?
It's simple, right? One, it's got to be in here. So you've got to be a certain type of mentality because a lot of folk could just walk away. But you always go back to your process again, right? I've got things that I've written down over the years that I go back to. And sometimes I stray down the wrong path and maybe I start to get a little bit too technical. I said it at the top of the show, too much detail. I've got guys that are going to be in 160 to 180 tackle contests per game. I can't have their mind cluttered with, if that player does this, do that. If this player does that and carries the ball here, do this. But guys can't cope with that. So sometimes, again, it's making it simple, going back to the simple things that work well and making sure that they're drilled brilliantly under fatigue, under fatigue. Because it's easy training it when we're full of air and oxygen and walking about. You got to train it when you're in the dark, dark hole, And getting them there is an art form as well, because sometimes you have to get them there, then you have to train it. And we did that brilliantly with the Blitzboks over the period of time we were there. We totally changed the contact collision training. And some of your best sevens players that South Africa's ever seen came out of that group. So, and 15s, if you look at Quagga, Cheslin, all these guys came out of there, so it was a great breeding ground.
Hey, Richie, you touched on something then. You're talking about the individual. How do you go about coaching different people differently? Some players you coach, what it's like. They want all the detail on their opponent. They want to know everything. They want to be told more as well. And others don't want to be cluttered at all, do they? They just don't. They're not that they're ambivalent, but they're more like, I'll worry about myself. I don't,
Yeah.
Is there any advice you can give to coaches listening about how to deal with those different people and those different groups of individuals that you might encounter when you're coaching a group?
Yeah, I've been there. We're lucky because, a lot of us have sports, psychologists now, and, you can lean on them quite a bit as well. But I remember, and funnily enough, it would go back to G's day at the Bulls. I remember the Bulls were handed out a left side and right sided brain questionnaire, which gave the coaches a slight insight into Gurthro Steenkamp wants incredible detail, Bakkies Botha wants to be left alone, Victor Matfield wants detail, Mornay Stain wants a little bit of detail but pretty much leave him. So they changed their whole half-time team talk because they found out that actually what they were saying to all the players, 2/3 of them weren't interested, And that's where those little things I used to love because they were like nuggets when I was a young coach thinking, that's bloody genius that, So you're saying that guys in the dressing room all think differently. Yes. Wow, that's unbelievable, And then when you actually look at it yourself, you think, right, look at Schalk Burger, for example, just leave Schalk alone. Schalk could go and have a couple of glasses of red wine on a Friday night. It wouldn't matter. He could be
and a few beers.
Don't
forget the beers.
But the minute he walks across the white line, you know what you're going to get. There's other ones want to see the videos. They want to do the analysis. We're all different. And the key in coaching is you have to understand your player, or you can sometimes lose them. If you go about trying to coach that player the wrong way, there's going to be a disconnect. So you have to take a bit of time to work out what players what,
How do you do that in a group setting though, Richie? Sorry, I probably didn't ask it very well, but how do you do that in a group setting when you've got those individuals who have differing needs, but so you don't necessarily have the time to work with them individually, or you might have those little corridor chats and things like that. But in that group setting, do you bring it down to a common foundation that's quite, as you talked about at the outset with Heineke, quite simple, and simplicity? How do you manage that?
I've been involved in many different ways of doing it in all the teams I've been with. But, if I look at Fiji, for example, the most important time for them, I think, was Lottu, which was 6 o'clock at night, where, all the dress was put on and they came and one of the players would give a reading and there'd be meaning to it. And that's a bit of genius as well, because you could really get clear messages put over there. And the Fijian mindset was, and it taught me, that if everybody's got a common goal, you can cope with many different types within the room, but we all know we're going to there. Many of us might get there in different ways. Don't worry about it, right? This guy's going to spend 4 hours in the gym because that's his way of getting there. This guy's going to he's going to switch off and have music on. He's going to be laughing all the time. You're going to think he's not bothered. He is, but he still wants to get there. And the key is trying to bring them all there, but there's got to be a shared vision. And they've got to belong to something. You've got to belong to something.
Richie, I just want to jump in here quickly because we're running a bit out of time. And before Ben closes off the show for us here, and this is a question that we actually asked Omar Monami, defensive coach, and he's just a passionate guy. How do you train aggression?
It's a good question.
How do you get players to be aggressive? Now, some of us are born with it, but not everybody's a bakkies boter. But how do you want to have aggressive team? You want guys to be aggressive at the right time.
Yeah.
You need to get down and out. So how do you bring that out of players, especially if a player doesn't have it?
So I never ever use the word aggression. Very rarely. I use 2 words. It's got to be accurate aggression. Because aggressive players sometimes can cause a lot of problems to themselves and to the opposition. Sometimes they don't last the game because they're sitting on the sides for 10 minutes or 20 or they're gone. So, you know what? In our world of contact and collision, you have to be brave. To do it, you have to be brave. To start with, good on you. Well done. You're making the choice to cross the line. And we all know the challenges, and the media writes about it a lot now, but at the end of the day, the sports are trying to keep them as safe as possible, but you still have to make a decision to cross the line. You have to have some sort of aggressivity in your body to play and be involved in contact collision sports, right? If you're a non-aggressive passive, you wouldn't be here anyway, right? So I think, and this is my opinion, everyone's got aggression. Everyone's got it. It's just how you control it. That's the key. That's the key. And when I first came to France, I remember meeting old coaches talking about the breakdown. No. The breakdown is all about aggression. That's what the breakdown is, right? There's no technique. It's about aggression. And G used to say, Guy Novez used to use an analogy of what he thought aggression was. So aggression it goes by the wayside. You got to have that, but you've got to be accurate with it, and you've got to make sure you can control it. And I always say we're always trying to play a millimeter from madness. If you think when somebody goes mad and loses it, you can get the strength of 10 men, you can just about rip a house apart. I want them a millimeter off it. That's where we are. The ceiling is a millimeter off it, because if we go through it, I don't know what I'm going to get then, And also that's where sometimes coaches have got to be careful, because you can, and again, it's knowing your players, you can start to build a player up. And I've been there many times where you think, I've said enough to this guy now, or he's going to go through the brick wall, So I'm just going to leave him alone now. So aggression, aggression's always going to be there, but you have to be accurate with it. A lot of players that are not aggressive are actually not accurate at their technique. So it stops them from being aggressive. I always say simplicity equals aggression. If it's simple and the player knows what's happening, bang, he can be aggressive.
But how do you train it, Richie? How do you get it out of the guys? How do you get let's me reframe this. You want to get accurate aggression? Great. But how do you train it? How do you get it out of the guys?
Oh boy, Gurthro, that would be a whole another 2-hour session.
Okay.
For me, I work on ways that I know work for me, I love working with training aids as long as they're the proper ones, because I know that instead of doing 30 minutes live, I can do 20 minutes of really accurate, fatigue, aggressive, full-blown, but we're on training aids, and then go 10 minutes live. And I remember when we did the study in the last year with the box with Dr. Craig and the guys, our injury rate was like just about zero. They couldn't believe it, you know, and we're doing a study at the moment with World Rugby at Cardiff Met, where we're changing the way that the boys train through the week, a lot more drill-based technical technique work instead of always going live, and we're finding huge changes in upper body injuries, concussion rates. So there's got to be something in this, and I know we're just at the start of it. You've got to train accuracy though, especially in the game now with the laws. You know, we can't have inaccurate players. It's going to cost us, you know. It's going to cost us.